So without further ado, I want to go ahead and open up that workbook that I was just referring to. It is already created with a bunch of sheets, so we don't have to worry about doing it, of course, any data entry today. But one of the features that I want to talk about first is an option in Excel that I highly recommend you take advantage of, and it's called named ranges. When we are working in Excel, a lot of times we're going to refer to the same range of cells over and over again, whether it's going to be in formulas, we want to use them for navigating. We can actually name a cell so that we can get to it. It becomes an absolute reference. There's a lot of benefits even way beyond our session today, even using tools like the what if analysis, it takes advantage of named ranges. So an example of using a named range is I'm going to go to cell G2. I want to do a formula that's going to be related to this 4% commission rate. And I want to be able to create the formula and be able to have other people understand what the formula is and what it's doing. Plus, I want to be able to copy the formula. And I don't always want to have the dollar signs for the absolute reference. So an easier way is to name the cell. So if we give the cell an actual name to describe what it is, it becomes an absolute reference, so we don't have to use the dollar signs. Plus, it makes it easier to understand the formula. So one way to do that, because of course this is Microsoft, there's always multiple ways to do the same things. I'm going to go to G2. I'm going to click in the name box at the top left of the formula bar. I'm going to click in the name box and I'm going to name this cell commission rate. Now I'm going to abbreviate a little bit, but I'm going to name it commission rate and then press enter. By the way, one of the guidelines for naming a cell or a range of cells is that you cannot have any spaces in the names, just like we can't with macros. They kind of follow the same rules. So use uppercase, lowercase to separate words, or you can use an underscore. But just keep in mind there are no spaces in the names. I'm just going to press my enter key to complete naming that cell. Now I'm going to use it in a formula. So I'm going to go to G5. I'm going to create a typical formula that's going to take the total sales for each person going across the row. And I'm basically going to multiply it by commission rate. I can either start typing CO to get to the list of functions. And by the way, when I typed CO, the left-hand side has a circle with an FX in front of the name. Those are actually functions built into Excel, which of course there's over 450 different functions available. But when it comes to that list, notice commission rate has a different icon. So the icon has the squares with the blue. So we always know it's a named range versus being a formula. I should say a function. If I double click commission rate, it automatically selects G2. I'm going to do Control Enter to complete that formula and I can see the answer. And when I look at the formula bar, the formula is easier to understand than having dollar signs G2, which the dollar signs can sometimes confuse users. So I'm going to copy this formula down for the other employees, and each one of them will now display that named range. So it's the absolute reference as I was mentioning. I use named ranges every day. This is not something that is a brand new feature. It's been around forever. Um, it's just an efficiency on doing things within Excel. I'll give you a couple of other examples as we talk about everyday functions we can be using. And one of them that I'm going to do next is actually based on the sales goal. I'm going to be using G1 in a formula to do an if. I'm going to use an if function, and basically the syntax of an if function is it needs to evaluate something to see if whatever we're evaluating is true or false. If it's true, we can have it do one thing. If it's false, we can have it do another thing, which is pretty common to do in Excel. So first, though, I'm going to name the cell on F1. I'm going to name it sales goal. I'm going to click in the name box again. I'm going to type sales goal, and I'm going to press my enter key. Now I want to use that in column H to really bring an answer back that says yes or no. I just want to know, has the person met their sales goal? So everybody has a sales goal. G1 has $6,500. And basically I want to look at the total in column F to see if it is greater than or equal to the sales goal. If it's true, I want it to say yes. If it's false, I want it to say no. So I'm going to start with equal I, the letter I, and I'm going to double click or tab on the word if, and I can see my arguments in the screen tip below. And I could manually type this in, but because I have multiple arguments, I need a comma to separate each argument. Plus, I'm going to be having text as my answer. And anytime we're using text in a formula, it has to be in quotes. I don't want to type all of that. So I'm going to click the FX for insert function to create my formula. It's just an easier way to kind of break the formula down. Plus, the computer will do a lot of the work for me. So in the logical test, I'm going to say that I wanted to look at F5 to see if it is greater than or equal to the sales goal, which is G1. And by the way, I happened to click on G1 and it automatically added the name of that cell. So it typed the name in there for me. On the right-hand side, I can already see that that's true. So I'm going to click in the value if true box, that field, and I'm going to type yes. Then I'm going to go to the value if false, and I'm going to put in no. Notice it automatically put quotes. And as soon as I click OK, it will put quotes around the word no as well. I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and it's going to give me the answer of yes, because this first person, the answer was true. So with an if function, we evaluate if whatever our criteria is true, do this. If it's false, do this. So you can see the answer is yes. I'm going to copy this formula down, and the reason I can copy it down is because I was using that named range. So it was automatically an absolute reference. So you can see the only person that qualified to say yes, they met their sales goal is the first person, Kendra James. But what if we go back and we audit our records, and let's say that Mike Smith really for quarter two had $2,000. As soon as I change that, it's going to automatically recalculate the answer to see if it still qualifies. It didn't qualify yet, but if we had other changes that were done to that range of cells, it will automatically update as the information changes, which is why we want to do things as a formula. Because if we just simply went there, looked at the cells, and typed yes or no, that's going to change as the data changes. So we want to make sure we use a formula instead. Now with Excel, when we talk about commonly used functions, of course, sum is the most common. We also have average, we have count, we have max, min. Those are kind of your top 5. But when it comes to, kind of taking this a little bit further, working with the if functions is definitely high on the list. So I want to talk about a couple of other if functions, including a sum if. Sum if will add a range of cells together if they match a criteria. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this employee departments worksheet, and up in the top in columns G, H, and I, I'm going to start out on G2, and I'm going to create a formula that's going to do a sum if. And basically what I want it to do is to add together all of the salaries in column F, but only if the department name is executive. So I wanted to analyze the department name, and if it says executive, I wanted to add together all the salaries. So I'm going to be using that range of cells for all three formulas. So I'm going to want to name the ranges. So I'm going to name department and the salary column. I can do those. And by the way, I'm just going to start on C5. I'm going to do a shift control down arrow, and it's going to select all the way to the bottom of my column without me clicking and dragging, which of course, if I have a million rows, I'm going to be selecting. It's a lot quicker to do it this way. And what I'm going to do, and by the way, I can do the salary at the same time. So I'm going to hold my control key down and I'm going to select the salary column as well, because basically what I want to do is I want to create named ranges for both those columns. But I'm not going to click in the name box to do it this time. I'm actually going to go to the formulas tab of the ribbon. There is a group called the defined names. This is where we manage our named ranges and we can create them. We can manage them, we can delete them, we can add new ones, we can use them, lots of different features within this group. I'm simply going to click Create from Selection because that's going to allow me to use the top row of what I selected to name the cells within the rest of the rows. So it's already selected on top row because it knows that was text, and I'm going to click OK. So right now I have a named range for the department and for the salary. Now, how do I know that it worked? Well, one thing that I can do is go to the name box. You've probably noticed there's a down arrow in the name box. You may not have known what it does, but if you click that down arrow, it will show you a list of the named ranges that are available across the workbook. So another benefit of named ranges is any of these can be used in other sheets. So you can see here's department. If I click department, it automatically selects that range of cells for the department. Just so you can see, if I go back to that drop down, let's say that I click commission rate. That's going to actually navigate me back to the worksheet for references and takes me directly to the cell that was named commission rate. So it's a way that we can easily navigate. Now we can use it in hyperlinks and other things too. So keep in mind, named ranges have a lot of benefits. But I'm going to jump back. So I'm going to go back to the name box again, click on the drop down, and I'm going to click salary, the other one that I just created. It takes me back to the employee departments worksheet and selects the range of cells that I named salary. Now I'm going to use both of those in the formula. So I'm going to go back to G2. I'm going to create a sum if. So I'm going to do equal. I'm going to start with an SU. From the drop-down list, I'm going to double-click sum if. Once I double-click sum if you look at the screen tip underneath, what it is looking for is it's required for us to put in the range and the criteria. It's optional, so it's in square brackets, for the sum range. So basically, what does this mean? What is it looking for? Well, the range is the range we want it to evaluate. In this case, that's actually the department. I want it to look at the department. So I'm going to type DE. From the list of functions and named ranges, I'm going to double click department so that I don't have to type it. I double click it. Then I'm going to put in a comma to separate my arguments, and I need to give it the criteria. Because the criteria is text, because I want it to look for executive, I'm going to put quote executive. And by the way, it does not need to be capitalized, even though in the department column, executive is a capital E. In my criteria, it doesn't care. It can be uppercase, lowercase. But I do need to close it out with another quote. Then I'm going to put in a comma because I do need that optional the optional sum range, because what is the range of cells I want it to add together? Well, that's going to be the salary. So I'm going to type an S. And from that drop-down list, I'm going to choose salary. So basically, I'm saying I wanted to look at the department. If it says executive, look across from where it says executive and add those numbers together based on the salary. I'm going to control enter to complete that formula and I will see the answer. So we can see the total salaries for everyone in that executive department. So that's a great option to be able to use to say, just add these together. I don't want everything, I just want specific cells. But we could do that same thing with counting. So we have on H2, I'm going to say I want to know how many people are in the executive department. So where's all these salaries coming from? How many people are in that department? We can use a function called COUNTIF, where it's only going to count the cells that match a specific whatever our criteria is. And our criteria is going to be looking at that looking at the department. And if it says executive, it's going to count how many times executive is in that column. So on H2, I'm going to start, of course, with equal. I'm going to type in COU to narrow my list down. I'm going to double click on COUNTIF. So I can see there's only two arguments. All it's looking for is what is the range of cells. I want it to look at department, so I'm going to put in DE and I'm going to double click department. So I'm reusing that named range over and over again, so I don't have to keep going back and selecting the range again and again and again. We want to be more efficient. Plus, it's easier to understand when we see the formula in the end, especially if you're going to share the workbook with other people. When they come and look at these formulas, it just makes it easier for them to read it. Now, after that, I need my criteria, so I need to put in a comma. And the criteria, of course, needs to be in quotes because it's text. I'm going to put in executive quote, and then I'm going to control enter again, and it's going to automatically tell me there are 12 people in the department column that currently have the department of executive. Now, of course, if that changes, because this list of employees, somebody might move from one department to another, or we might add a new employee to that department. Because we're doing this with formulas, the formulas will automatically update. Now, the last one I'm going to do in this example is going to be the average if. I want to get an average of the salaries if the department is executive. So we want to know what is the average salary for everyone in the executive department. So we can use an average if. It works the same as a sum if, but it does an average instead of the sum. So I'm going to do equal AV. I'm going to double click average if. It gives me the same criteria. You know, we have the range, it wants to know the criteria, and then it has the optional sum range. Now, once again, I could either hand type this in, or I could click the FX, which I call it the helper window, because I started the formula. It will take me to the function arguments window, or I could just physically, of course, typed it in. But I'm going to use it this way because I want to show you one other thing in here. So in the range, I want it to be the department. So I could type department, I could select the range, but what if I don't want to type it? I forgot what the name is, but I know it started with DE. We can actually do, and I have to use my fun key for this, my FN. I can press my function key F3. F3 will bring up a list of my named ranges. So instead of me having to go back and select the range, or I forgot what the name of the range was, I could come here to see a list. And there's department. That's the one that I want. I can double click it and it will automatically add the department for me without me having to type it in. My criteria is going to be executive. Oops. If I could type today, sorry, executive, and then the average range. And you could see that I'm actually getting an error on that right now because I haven't fulfilled everything. But basically, I wanted to look at the department. If it says the word executive, I want to get an average of the salaries. I can either type salary in, or I can actually do that F3 again and use it from my list. Now, I got an error before I put in that average range. Showed up in red and it was the hashtag. Um, Anytime that there's an error when you're creating these formulas by using this function arguments, it lets you know you have an error right away, which is actually a really great tool. But I just knew that it was because I hadn't even finished the formula yet. So it wasn't patient and waiting for me to finish before it gave me the error. It does it instantly. And if there were a problem in one of those fields, like if the range was wrong, it would have given me an error on the right-hand side, but the errors always show up in red. Now, this function arguments window, while I'm in here, I want to explain something. I actually call it the helper window because it helps you build the formula. The best part about it is it gives you help. So if you're creating a function, you're looking at range, criteria, average range, which by the way, where it says range criteria, notice they're bold. They're bold because they're required. It's optional to put in the average range, so that's not bold. So everything here has a rhyme and a reason. But just so you can see, whichever field you are clicked in, it gives you a screen tip kind of in the middle there describing what that is. What are you supposed to do there? But if you look at this and you're not quite sure, you can always go to the bottom left of this window and click help on this function. It will take you into Microsoft's website directly to the help on using the average if, or whichever function you're doing at the time. It will give you examples. It's going to break apart the entire syntax. Every argument is described. It will also sometimes include videos that you can watch. So that's why I call this the helper window. It's a great way to automate what you're doing and to get additional help if needed. But I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and it will automatically give me the answer to the average for all of the employees within that executive committee. So these are going to be, once again, some of the more commonly used. And I gave you a few examples of these throughout your handout, because I know once you go back, you're working again and you decide you want to use one of these, you might forget what it is that we did, so I wanted to give you a few examples. So there's some examples on doing a count if and using the average if as well. But I'm going to continue this conversation with some functions. And in your handout on page 5, it talks about lookup functions, lookup and reference functions. And I'm going to stay right here in this employee list, because in rows 1 and 2, columns B through E, I have an employee ID column, last name, first name, and department. And what I want to do is to be able to look within a range of cells of all of our employee information and be able to come back with an answer to looking up different details. So in columns A through I, we have a record number, we have an employee ID, we have their department, data hire, degree, etc. going across. And I want to be able to say, even if somebody calls me up and they say, hey, I need to know what department this employee is in. Well, what's their employee ID number? We put in the employee ID number and it can automatically populate last name, first name, department, or whatever information it is that we may need out of that data source. And by the way, row 5 and down doesn't need to be in the same worksheet. It could be in a different workbook that we look things up in. Different sheet, different workbook, wherever it resides. But I want to be able to say, here's the employee ID number. I want you to find first the last name. Now I'm going to take one of these employee IDs. I'm going to take any one of these and just copy it and put it on cell B2. Basically, what I want to do is look up that employee ID number to find that person's last name. So I'm going to go to C2 and I'm going to create first, I'm going to demonstrate how to do a VLOOKUP. V stands for vertical, which means it's going to look vertically across a range of data known as a table array. Technically, it's called a table array, but it's a range of cells. Let me walk you through this. It will make more sense as we do this, but I do have this described in your handout, breaking apart the arguments and giving you a few examples. But I'm going to start with equal V. I'm going to double click on VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP really is referring to looking up a value. The lookup value that it's looking for right now based on our arguments is actually the employee ID number. So I'm going to click B2. That's my lookup value. So when I'm looking at my little screen tip, I'm going to put in a comma. The next argument is the table array. It needs to know where is the range of cells that you want me to look in. I'm going to select B6 across through I6 all the way down through my range of cells. Now, I just did a couple of keyboard shortcuts with that, by the way. I did Shift Control right arrow to go across, Shift Control down arrow to go all the way down. So just a couple shortcuts there. So basically, this is the range of cells I want the formula to look in. I'm going to put a comma after the table array. Now it wants to know the column index number. Basically, what that is asking is which column going across this table array is the answer we're looking for. I want the last name. So I need to count the columns across, starting with the first column, which is employee ID. I didn't include the record number, so I don't count that. Employee ID is column 1, department, data hire, degree, salary, and then I get last name. So last name, which is what I'm looking up, is the 6th column across. So I'm going to put in a 6. I'm going to control enter and it automatically will locate that employee ID and match up their last name. So a VLOOKUP can look across our table array to find the answer based on the lookup value. So I'm going to do one more example to find the first name. I'm going to do on D2, I'm going to do equal V. I'm going to double click VLOOKUP again. I want it to look up B2, B2, which is the employee ID number, comma. It's going to find it within this range of cells going from B6 across to I6 and then all the way down. That's our table array. Then I need a comma, and it needs to know the column index number going across. So once again, I have to count. Employee ID, department, data hire, degree, salary, last name, first name. It's the 7th column across. I'm going to put in a 7. I'm going to control enter, and it will automatically find that person's first name. This has been a very commonly used function for a long time. I've been using VLOOKUP for 20 plus years, but recently Microsoft has given us a different option. There's a lot of lookup functions, but the new option, to be honest, I never use VLOOKUP anymore. Never. I never use VLOOKUP because if I want to do department, once again, I have to create another formula using a VLOOKUP, and I don't like to have to count the columns across and all that work. What if I had 16,000 columns going across of data? You would never want to do all of that. There was an alternative using a match and an index, but regardless, there's an easier way these days, and it's actually called an X lookup. What an X lookup does is it simplifies this formula. Plus, it can do the vertical lookup and it can do a horizontal lookup. An X lookup does both. Plus, it has extra arguments that we don't have with a VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP, which, by the way, an HLOOKUP, we would have to count the rows down to find an answer within a row. So V for across, H for going down. I don't use either anymore. I simply use the XLOOKUP. Let me describe how this is going to work. So let's say that I want to be able to find the department. I'll just do the department on its own as an example. But I'm going to use an XLOOKUP instead, but I'm still going to look up the employee ID, which, by the way, in a VLOOKUP, when we do that table array, the lookup value has to be the first column of the table array, or the formula doesn't work. We don't have to worry about that with the next lookup. It's very efficient. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to do on E2, I'm going to do equal X. I'm going to double click XLOOKUP. You can see that it has similar looking arguments to it, but it has more choices. But first it's looking for the lookup value, which is going to be B2, just like the VLOOKUP. I'm going to put in a comma, and this is already what's different. It's looking for where am I going to find that lookup value? Which column of data or row of data is it coming from? It's the employee ID. So I'm going to select B6 down to the bottom of B52. That's going to be my lookup array to find the lookup value. So it could have been any column. I could have said to look up their salary and it would match the person. But I'm going to go ahead and do a comma after that. Oops, sorry. I clicked my mouse. Let me do that over. So I wanted to look at sorry, this is me. I know I did few too many arguments. Let me go back and select my range. Oh, select my range again. I'm sorry, that was totally my fault. Oops. Okay, so now that I have that range back in there, I won't move my mouse again. What it's looking for now, oops, sorry, I got to put my lookup value in here first. Jolene. I know it's thinking that I'm, okay, so my lookup value, here's my lookup range. Sorry about that. And then now what it's looking for is where's the answer coming from? What is the column that's going to bring back the answer? So it wants to know the return array. I want to find the department. So that's going to be C6 through C52. Then I can just control enter and it's going to automatically find the department based on that employee ID number. So great way to be able to locate information. But once again, if I'm doing the VLOOKUP, I have to do every formula separately. But what if, we'll play the what if game here for a moment. What if I want to be able to find department, data hire, degree, salary, last name, first name, and their initial? I want to know all that information. I'm just going to copy those and paste them over here on the side. And I want to locate all that information based on whoever I'm looking up. I want to look up all this different detail. I can do all of them at one time using the XLOOKUP. Plus, if the employee ID number is not found, in the XLOOKUP function, I can build in an error. So I'm going to go to K2. I'm going to do an equal XLOOKUP. What I'm going to do is tell it, yeah, I want to look up that employee ID on B2. It needs to know where is it going to find that employee ID number. So I'm going to do my lookup range. which is my column B, B6 through B52. But for the return array, I can choose multiple columns of data. So I'm going to do C6 across to I6 all the way down through 52, row 52. So I'm choosing multiple columns to return the values. I'm going to put in a comma because the next argument is actually if not found. It's an optional argument in the XLOOKUP, and I want to be able to say employee ID not found. So basically, I'm just telling the computer that if the employee ID isn't found, this is what I want it to return as the error. I'm going to control enter and close that formula out, and it automatically populates all of the answers. Now, of course, the date of hire isn't formatted, but you get the idea that it automatically does all of them at one time. But let me go back to B2. What if this is not a valid employee ID number? Oops, that is a valid number. Let me actually put in an invalid number. If I'm using the VLOOKUP, it gives me hashtag NA because it can't find that employee ID number. But I built it in as an error code with the XLOOKUP, so it automatically came back and said employee ID not found. Now, could I have done it in the VLOOKUP? Yes, I could have added an if error and nested the function, but that's extra work. I don't want to have to do extra work. I'd rather use an XLOOKUP. It has a lot more advantages. Now, it has more advantages to that, but we'll save that for another session. But I really like this new XLOOKUP. Relatively new. It's not super new. But if you have not used that XLOOKUP yet, I gave you all the arguments, a description of each of the arguments in your handout, as well as examples of how to use that. So step by step on using different examples for that. It's pretty cool. So definitely want to practice with that XLOOKUP. Like I said, I no longer use the VLOOKUP or the HLOOKUP because technically the XLOOKUP can do both. It can do both. Next thing I want to do is a date formula. I'm going to go to the worksheet called dates. And I want to create, based on this employee information, I want to create a column, this column F, to display the years of service that employee has given to the organization. There's multiple ways to get this answer, but what I'm going to use is a year function. And I'm going to include a today function. Notice in this range of data, there is a data hire. So what I want to do is take today's date and subtract their data hire. But I want the answer to be based on years. So I'm going to do equal a Y. I'm going to use the year function. And I'm going to say I want it to use today. Today is another function that automatically looks at your system date. So it's always going to be up to date, knowing today's date and subtracting their data hire. The today function has no arguments, so I'm going to put in a right paren. But because I'm nesting functions, I have to add another right paren to close out the year function. So this is going to give me the year for today's date. I'm going to subtract, I'm going to do the year again, the year function, and this time for the serial number, I'm going to choose D4. I wanted to look at D4 to subtract that year from the today's year. I'm going to control enter, and it's going to come back with an answer of a date because I'm using a date formula, but I can just change the formatting. It assumes I want a date because I'm using a date function, but in the number group on the home tab, I'm just going to click on the drop down and say general. So this first employee has been with the organization for 40 years based on the data hire in 1985. I'm taking today, so 2025 minus 1985 gives us that 20 years of service. And because I use the today function, I can copy this formula down for all the other employees, and it will automatically give us the answer based on each of the individual date of hires in column D. So I use two different date functions. There's really about 22 different date functions available. They might have added a couple. They did. They added some new ones. So 22 is no longer an accurate number. There's more date functions available. But just to show you an example of how you could use that date, year grabs the year out of whatever the date is. The today function always gives us the today date. Pretty cool. I gave you a few other examples in your handout, as well as kind of some other date options that you could be using too, but the description of those. But the other feature that I wanted to do in this worksheet is I want to go to column H. And I need the extension number for each of these employees, and it's included in column G. Column G actually contains the last four numbers in column G is the extension number for each of the employees. But I'm not going to just type them all in. I want the computer to do it for me. I'm going to go to H4. I'm going to give the first one to the computer. So I look at column G and the last four numbers is 2099. I'm going to control enter, and I want that last four numbers from column G to appear here in this column for every employee. I'm going to use a feature on the data tab of the ribbon in the data tools group called Flash Fill. Flash Fill will look at the pattern of the cell you are on and follow your pattern all the way down. So it just filled in the last four numbers by looking at the rows to the left, the rows to the right, and it says, hey, I saw this number and I'm assuming you want me to fill in all of the rest for you. So it automatically did that. It's pretty smart though. I'm going to go to column I and I'm going to use the flash fill again, but this time I want it to look at column G and give me the name of the building. So it's got lab, central, HQ, etc. I'm going to give it the first one. I'm going to type LAB. I'm going to control enter to stay on that cell. I'm going to click flash fill again, and it follows the pattern of grabbing each of those building names from column G. So the flash fill is an efficiency tool that we have built into Excel that can help follow a pattern, but it does a lot more than that. I'm going to go to column A because it does look left or right, and I want the full name. Let's say that I exported this data out of my AS400 or my ERP system or whatever, and it came in with the last name in a separate column and then the first name in a different column. And notice they're uppercase. I don't want them to be uppercase. I want to combine together first name, space, last name, and I want proper casing. I'm going to type the first one in. I'm going to put in Erica space Decker, and I'm capitalizing just the first letters of the name. I'm going to control enter to stay on that cell, so flash fill will follow my pattern. So it can combine different cells of data together. I'm going to click flash fill again. And once again, it's going to follow my pattern and fill in the combination of the first and the last names, and it followed my casing. So it knew to capitalize instead of doing the full casing again, the uppercase. So great way to be able to analyze that data. So I love that flash fill. If you have not used that yet, highly recommend checking that out. Now, our next topic moving along, because we have so many things to cover, is sorting and filtering data. And I'm actually going to go to the subtotal pivot worksheet. This subtotal pivot worksheet has a lot of different orders. So a company places an order. Here's the products that they ordered, the quantity, all who was their salesperson, what country were they in, and I need to be able to sort this list based on the salesperson's name. I can click anywhere within that salesperson's column and sort this data just simply by going to the Data tab or the Home tab of the ribbon, but I personally use the Data tab a lot. So I'm going to go to the Sort and Filter group. I'm going to click A to Z. It automatically sorts based on the column I was actively in. So it's sorted by salesperson. And it's smart enough to keep all of that information together in each row. So every row is considered a record. They basically are looking at this as a data source, as a database of people. So it keeps everything in the row together as it sorts. But if I'm going to be doing a lot of sorting of this information, and I want to be able to limit the information that I'm seeing based on columns and rows, I'm not going to keep doing it this way. I most likely will want to turn on filtering. So if I'm selected within a range of data and I want to sort and I want to filter my data to limit the rows of information I'm seeing based on a criteria, I'm going to turn my filters on. From the Data tab of the ribbon, I'm just going to simply click my filter icon. It gives me a drop-down arrow for each of the headings going across the top. And let's say that I want to sort by country. I could go to the drop-down arrow for country. I could go to sort A to Z and automatically sort this entire record set of data based on the country. So I can sort by that filter dropdown. But what if I only want to see specific coworkers, specific salespeople's records of information? Let's say that I only want to see Robert King's orders. I can use that salesperson dropdown, and it's going to give me a unique list under the search where it says select all. It gives me an alphabetized unique list of every salesperson in this list. And there's over 1,400 rows of data. I'm going to uncheck the select all. And I only wanted to see Robert King, so I'm going to click the square in front of Robert King and click OK. Notice on the left-hand side, it doesn't have 1, 2, 3, 4 going all the way down through 1,048,576. It really shows blue numbers for the records that match the criteria of being the salesperson, Robert King. So it's automatically giving us just the orders for Robert King. If I decide I wanted to filter by something else, what if I only want to see the orders that were placed in the USA? I could go to the country column. I want to see Robert King's orders for USA. I can filter a filter. So I'm going to go to the country dropdown. I'm going to uncheck the select all, scroll down on this unique list of all the countries, choose USA, click OK. Now I'm only seeing Robert King's orders for USA. So we can quickly and easily filter our data to only see what we need to see. But I'm going to go to the ribbon again. In that Data tab, I'm going to click Clear. Clear will clear out all filters that I have applied. Great option to quickly and easily clear a filter. But I want to do one more formula with you. I'm going to do two formulas. I want to go to L1 and I'm going to create a formula to add together all of the extended prices in column J. So I'm basically just going to do a sum. I'm going to do a sum of the extended prices in column J. So basically, I just did equal sum every cell in column J. I'm going to actually do that same thing in column M. I want to add together all the extended prices, but I'm going to do it with a different formula. I'm going to use a subtotal. I'm going to do equal SU. I'm going to double click subtotal. And subtotal can do different types of functions. So you're going to see a number corresponding to the function. The number is a hidden code to the computer. I want it to do a sum. So I'm going to double click on 9-sum. Then I'm going to put in a comma. I need to tell it what are the cells I want it to add together. So I'm going to select J2, do a shift control down arrow, select all those cells. I'm going to do control enter, and I'm going to get exactly the same answer because the sum and the subtotal were both doing a sum of the same range. So why would I ever use a subtotal versus a sum? Well, I'm going to go back and do another filter. I want to filter by quantity. I only want to see if the quantity was 60 or more. I only want to see the orders that had larger quantities. I'm going to go to the quantity dropdown. I'm going to hesitate on number filters, and I'm going to say greater than or equal to, greater than or equal to. And in the custom auto filter, I'm going to say 60. I only want to see if it's 60 or more for the quantity. I'm going to click OK. So now I'm only seeing the records of information that had a quantity of 60 or more, which, by the way, on the status bar at the bottom left, I can see there's 93 records out of 1,464 total records that matched my filter criteria. If you look at the formulas in L1 and M1, the subtotal changes because the subtotal is only for the filtered records. The sum function always gives you all of them. The subtotal changes as you filter your data. If I go back and clear the filter for the quantity again, it will bring back the same answers for both functions. So great option to be using. And one more quick feature I want to talk about today, because we're running out of time already, is I'm going to go back to the references worksheet. Anytime you have a range of data, that data can quickly and easily be turned into a chart simply by selecting a range of data, which I'm going to choose the salespeople's names and their sales for quarters 1 through 4. Once I select that range, I can go to the Insert tab of the ribbon. There is a charts group. I'm going to click recommended charts because that way I can actually see which charts are being recommended by the system based on my data. So Excel analyzes your range of data and says, here's your best choices. On the left-hand side, I can click on any of these icons and it's going to display the chart on the right. So if I look at all of these, it's even got funnel charts at the bottom. And I'm going to say I want the first one. I want this clustered column. All I have to do is click OK. It will automatically insert that chart in the middle of my worksheet, but I can click and drag and move it wherever I want it to go. And I can easily make changes to it because there is a chart design tab on the ribbon. It's going to give you chart styles, which will change the graphical appearance of your chart. It can add different chart elements. And so I can click on any of those and it instantly updates to make a very professional looking chart. And I can do that in about 2-3 seconds. But if I want to make additional changes to this, I can also go to the ribbon and use a feature called Quick Layouts. These are pre-formatted options that we can change our chart to be using. It adds and removes different elements. It even can include what is called a data table. So this option that I'm hesitating on for layout number 5 can add a data table to the bottom of the chart. So if you have people that are going to see this chart and they like to see all the numbers that correspond with the actual data, you can use a data table to display that. Makes it super easy. And it took me only a minute or not even a minute. Seriously, I could have created this in about 2 seconds. But there are different ways to create charts. So if I go back and select my range of data again, let's say I just want a pie chart for quarter 1. I could go back to, and by the way, there's multiple ways to do this. I could just simply go to the icon on the bottom right called the quick analysis. Every time you select a range, you get that icon. If I click on that, it gives me the most common things that I might do with that selected range. I can click charts, and from there, I can click pie. It automatically will give me a pie chart based on the range of cells that I had selected. So that's another way. I could give you 4 different ways basically to create a chart because there's so many different options. But once again, I'm going to get my chart styles on the ribbon, or I could use add chart elements. I could use quick layouts, and I could be adding different information or changing the appearance of my chart. And it only took me a couple of seconds to do it. So it's a matter of selecting your cells and then using the insert tab or that icon at the bottom right. Lots of different choices to have a visual representation of your data to display for other users. So that was a lot of detail, a lot of information. Highly recommend you go back through your handout, use the practice file that we included to kind of practice these different features that we have so that you can get yourself up to speed on what it is that Excel has to offer.